Becoming Naomi Leone, Chapter 8, page 75. A Burden of Mules. Lemon Tree is already decorating for Christmas, and Thanksgiving is still a week away. They start earlier every year, said Graham, when we got into the car. She was talking in that I'm just making conversation voice. I stared straight ahead with my arms crossed and didn't say a word. Neither did Owen. When Graham turned right instead of left at the corner, I knew we were headed for spray and play, Graham's destination after any difficulty or cause for celebration. Outside, the play area had one of those padded climbing gyms, and inside, the deli had a soft-serve ice cream counter with all the toppings. Our favorite thing to do was fix sundaes and sit in front of the giant picture window, which looked directly into the car wash, the part where the cars rolled through on the track. It was fine to go there after Owen had a particularly bad day at physical therapy, or to celebrate if I got a good grade on a test. But did Graham really think that ice cream would make up for Skyla leaving us again? I pressed my nose to the car window. A vacant lot had been fenced with chain link and a big sign read, "Trees coming soon." A few store windows had already been frosted like cakes with spray on snow. Colored Christmas lights sparkled on the eaves of some of the buildings. In front of a church, a man struggled to lift a life-size plastic Mary with child onto a plastic donkey for a giant nativity scene. The donkey looked much too small for its load. I saw a family walking down the street. The mom pushed a stroller with a young girl snuggled inside, happily holding a stuffed doll. The father wore a baby backpack with a little boy perched on his shoulders. The mother laughed, and the father leaned over and kissed her. If Skyla hadn't been having problems with alcohol, and if our father had come back to Lemon Tree, would that have been us? Graham parked the Toyota at Spray and Play. My arms still crossed and head hunched over, I followed her and Owen inside. The clerk stood in front of the soft-serve machine, with pieces of the insides unassembled on the counter in front of her. "Sorry," she said, shrugging her shoulders when she saw us. "I'm cleaning the dispensers." We walked over toward the car wash area. A big sign had been taped to the viewing window, "Closed for repairs." Two men in overalls worked on the other side of the window, tinkering with the spray nozzles. We sat down at a table near the picture window anyway. Graham sent Owen to buy 3 ready-made ice cream sandwiches. "I guess it's just not our lucky day," she said. I ignored her. It seemed Owen's found penny had been wrong. When Owen came back with the ice cream, I let mine sit on the table and melt. Owen and Graham ate theirs in silence, and then the 3 of us peered through the car wash window into the quiet of the stock-still machinery. It's not going to start up, no matter how hard we stare. A watched pot doesn't boil, although, Naomi, I've been sitting here watching you, and you look like you're going to burst. Our entire life, Graham had been tight-lipped about anything to do with our parents. If Owen asked, "What was our mother like?" Graham always answered, "That's best left unsaid. Let's focus on the future." If I asked about our father, Graham said, "Naomi, let's not dredge up the river bottom." Didn't she know that Owen and I had a million questions? Finally, I turned to face her. "We waited and waited. Owen wore a suit and tie. Blanca and her mother waited too. What's rehab in a halfway house? Is Skyla sick? And what about our father? I thought he didn't want us, but he did. Deliberately, and at a snail's pace, Graham wiped her hands with a napkin. She always went into slow motion when she was putting her thoughts in order. A rehab hospital is a place people go to recover from alcoholism, from letting alcohol mess up their lives. I'm sorry to say that Skyla has been in several. When she gets out of a rehab hospital, she has to go into a halfway house for a while. It's a house where people learn how to live in the real world again, but with counselors watching over them. And sometimes, after a lot of years, drinking makes a person's brain work cattywampus, and doctors have to give them medicine to straighten it out, so they can handle their everyday problems. Why didn't you tell us? I asked. I didn't know until she showed up here last week. She asked me not to mention it to you, said Graham. I was giving Skyla the benefit of making a clean start with her life, and with you kids. She admitted she'd made a lot of bad decisions, and pointed out that the one good decision she had made was to leave your children with me. And, well, I guess I hung my hat on the prospect that she had put herself together. What about our father? I said. Ms. Morimoto told Ms. Dominguez that our father wanted us, but Skyla wouldn't let him see us. Graham took a deep breath. So much happened back then. I've carried it too long. The night of the storm, after Santiago saved you from the flooded motel, he went to move his boat to the harbor, but got caught in the hurricane. His motor broke, and the boat was blown south into a cove, where he was stranded for over a week. When he finally got help, and a tow back to Rosarito, he went straight back to the church, but Skyla had already left with you two. I watched the melted ice cream drip from the table to the floor. Santiago called my house right away. He and Skyla had some heated phone calls, all fights and fury. After one of the calls, she tore every picture of your father to shreds. She told him in no uncertain terms that if he tried to contact you, she'd take him to court. It was all bluster, but Santiago didn't know that. I'm sure the poor man was fed up with her shenanigans. After that, I didn't hear from him for several years. Then one day, he started sending money orders in care of me for you both. He sends a sizable amount a couple of times a year. A surge of frustration welled up inside of me. Why did grown-ups always think that kids couldn't understand the truth? With Skyla showing up and all this new information about my father, I might as well have been lugging around a giant suitcase filled with rocks for the weariness that settled on my shoulders. We could have written him a letter to tell him we were with you, I said. I tried that, Naomi. I wrote a half-dozen letters, but they all came back to me, and none of his money order envelopes ever had a return address. You could have at least told us. I buried my head in Graham's lap and started to cry. Graham patted my back. He was a fisherman, and sometimes spent weeks out on his boat. That was no life for you kids. By the time I got Owen set up with his doctors, and you with a counselor, I was so attached that I didn't want to take the tiniest chance of losing either one of you. After my letters came back, I didn't try anymore. That was selfish on my part. You can blame me for that. Just then, a big noise echoed from inside the car wash, interrupting my cry. I sat up. The machinery turned on the other side of the viewing window, and a car headed through on the track. Tiny jets sprayed foamy soaps and waxes in rainbow colors on the car. Then the giant machinery went to work, scrubbing and lathering. Finally, finger-like water nozzles waved back and forth, rinsing off the suds. Owen tapped me on the shoulder. You can stop now, Naomi. They got the car wash working. He and Graham laughed, but I couldn't summon a smile. We watched a few cars go through the wash. Any more nettles in your cap? Asked Graham, taking my hand. I looked up at her. What's a vicious circle? Skyla never came home the night of the conference. 3 nights later, Graham, Owen, and I had cleaned the kitchen from Sunday pot roast and arranged ourselves comfy on the sofa to watch television. That's when Skyla's car pulled up and her horn beeped. Graham tensed. Owen and I sat still as statues. A few minutes later, the door popped open. Come outside, everyone, Skyla said, all cheerful. I have a surprise and news. Which do you want first? Was she really going to act like nothing happened? Graham demanded. Have you lost your mind? Why didn't you go to the conference and pick up these children up from school on Thursday? Skyla didn't blink. She just stared at Graham and said, Something came up. Sorry. Don't you want to hear my news? These children have been counting on you to show up, continued Graham. Their teachers had appointments with you. Naomi and Owen waited on the steps of the school until dark. Where were you? Skyla tilted her head and looked confused. Clive and I went to Palm Springs for a long weekend. That's all. Now, my news is that I invited Clive to come for Thanksgiving, and he said yes. He is dying to meet you all. Isn't that great? Skyla looked from me to Owen to Graham. I was sure we looked like a jury, sitting all in a row on the sofa. What? Are you all going to ruin everything by holding it against me that I skipped 2 little conferences? I can't believe it. Obviously, everyone got home just fine, and no harm was done. That is just like you, Graham. You were always this way, raining on all of my joy. And it looks like you've taught these children your same pitiful attitude. Well, I am not going to let you spoil my spirit. Now, out in my car is a big present, and I have been counting the minutes to get it here. But I can just as easily return it, if that's what you want. She turned and walked out, slamming the door. Graham closed her eyes and shook her head, talking to the ceiling. How does she always turn things around in her favor? Can we go look? Asked Owen. Please? Graham finally nodded, and Owen and I bolted outside. Skyla opened the trunk of the car and struggled to pull something out. A few seconds later, she wheeled a brand new bicycle into the halo of porch light. I sucked in my breath. The tags and a helmet dangled from the handlebars, and the blue metallic paint shimmered. It had all the expensive extras, a light, fancy reflectors, and a leather pack behind the seat. A bike, said Owen, clapping the sides of his cheeks and jumping up and down. Isn't it beautiful, said Skyla. Owen, it's a present for you from Clive. He wants to meet all of you, and this is his way of introducing himself. Well? Graham was flat out staring at Skyla in disbelief, with her mouth so wide open that she was going to catch flies if she didn't shut it soon. Skyla beamed. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Owen said it so loud, I was sure everyone at Avocado Acres heard him. He was already balanced on the seat, with Graham holding the handlebars. He couldn't ride it yet, because it needed to be adjusted for his height, and he needed a little block of wood on one of the pedals, so his legs would be even. Graham wheeled him away toward the blacktop as he called, Thank you! I was so happy for Owen that I wanted to hug Skyla, but she leaned against the car, looking after him, and she wasn't smiling. Her arms were crossed tight, not inviting affection. Thank you for buying Owen the bike, I said, my voice whisper. Skyla glared at me. Naomi, why can't you speak up? When Clive comes over for Thanksgiving, I expect you to tell him loud and clear, thank you very much for all his thoughtfulness. She continued with a short, clipped voice. He paid for that bike and everything else. He wants to be friends with you, especially, and I'm counting on you doing the same in return for all he's done. You owe him that, so don't disappoint me. Do you understand me, young lady? I quickly nodded and backed away from Skyla, then turned and ran after Graham and Owen. Was I in trouble? Why did Clive want to be my friend? Why did I have to tell him thank you loud and clear? I didn't want to owe him anything. I caught up to Owen and Graham and took over pushing the bike. As I wheeled Owen around the trailer park loop, a troublesome feeling tiptoed after me like a lurking shadow.